You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Head on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me today we have two special guests joining me, Sayre and Cam. Now, they've both been on our show before, so hopefully you remember them. But guys, how's it going today?
Oh, it feels great to be here, man. Thank you for having us, and it's another predominantly orange Mile High Huddle crossover. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
I love it, man. I'm excited as well to be here. Back on the Building the Broncos. It's an exciting time, no doubt.
Definitely. Well, I'm glad to have you guys back, and it's going to be a fun show. I'm very, very excited for this. But I want to let everybody know that our Building the Broncos podcast is focused on all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos as it relates to the NFL draft, team building, and of course, just a little bit of scouting the upcoming opponent. With Nick and myself being armchair GMs, we'll be bringing you a fresh insight and analysis each and every week in every single episode, from scouting the enemy, player value, scheme and personnel fits, and of course, just a little bit of general football-related banter. You can follow myself on Twitter at CarlDumlerMHH. And of course, you guys want to give your Twitter handles here?
Yeah, you guys can follow me down on Twitter at Cameron Parker PO.
Yeah, you can follow me and Ty at Predom Orange, or you can follow my personal account at Sayre Bedinger. So a couple of places to find me there. It's kind of handy.
There you go. Well, make sure to tweet us any questions or opinions you have, because honestly, not only Nick and I, but these two guys as well live for talking some Bronco football. You can also follow the podcast Twitter account at HuddleUpPod. And make sure you check out ours and our co-writers' written content at milehighhuddle.com, a part of 24/7 Sports and an affiliate of the CBS Sports Digital Network. We know you listeners are as football, draft, and Bronco crazy as we are. So please give us a click and subscribe to us on iTunes as well as Stitcher. And don't forget to share us on Facebook and Twitter. We wouldn't be here today without you listeners. So as a call to action, please take the time and go to iTunes or Spreaker and rate and subscribe to let your voices be heard on how you enjoy our show. Now, before we get going, we first want to say thank you to our great sponsor, Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/huddleup. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Again, that's www.audibletrial.com/huddleup. All right, gentlemen. So I'll kind of guide you through here of what we like to do for these kind of shows. But of course, before we move forward, we always kind of like to take a second to look back and just look back at this past week. And the Broncos gave a pretty good little showing against a very, very tough opponent, and kept it a lot closer than a lot of people thought it would be. Vegas gave, I think it was, what was the final numbers? -7 for the Rams. I mean, the largest point spread in a game in Mile High since like 1995.
Wow.
That's pretty crazy. So again, Broncos fought their hardest, got it down to a 3-point game, but ended up losing. But that doesn't mean that there weren't some players that really stood out in a good way. So is there anybody, this is our stock report, and this is the stock up, any players that really stood out to you guys as guys that gave some encouraging marks moving forward?
I think for me, you gotta go with the Bradley Chubb. I mean, he had his welcome to the NFL against the Chicago Bears in the preseason, but he had a full game of welcome to the NFL, and it was the first time we saw Von Miller and Bradley Chubb start coexisting and play the type of football that we had expected from once Bradley Chubb was drafted with a 5th overall pick. And so to me, both of those guys' stock went up, because it was the first time we had actually seen them gel together. And who knows, in essence, what all that entailed. I mean, was it because Wade Phillips was on the sideline and so the emotions were riding high that they wanted, at least Von Miller wanted to perform well in front of his defensive coordinator? I don't know, but they did play pretty darn well, and Bradley Chubb threw Andrew Whitworth like a rag doll the entire game. I mean, he was a pretty relentless animal. For 3 sacks and 3 tackles for loss. He was pretty consistent all throughout the game.
The crazy thing, I went back and reviewed his film. I have a film piece coming out on him this week. His best play, I thought, during the game was one he didn't get the sack. The Rams ran a play-action play. He was lined up against the tight end. He cut inside to help out with the run game, go in the opposite direction, saw it wasn't going to be a run, and the tight end tried to block him, and with his left hand, his non-dominant hand, he grabs that tight end, lifts him up in the air, and just throws him to the side. And then runs right at Goff, forcing him to have to step up in the pocket. And Von Miller ended up with a sack. Like you just said, that these two guys learning to coexist, of being complementary. There's a couple sacks that Chubb got because Von Miller got pressure. And that was just, it was very, very encouraging to see these guys just work in tandem, like you said, and learn to feed off each other. It was something that I hadn't seen since, of course, DeMarcus Ware in 2015 with Von Miller. Those guys just had it perfect. One go high, one go low, whatever it took. And I think Bradley Chubb's finally getting there.
Yeah, that's exciting to see because I think over the course of the first 5 games, there's a lot of excitement happening with a new era in Cleveland. Obviously, Baker Mayfield being there, and even Denzel Ward is playing well for them. And then you've got Darnold, who kicked our butts, playing for the Jets, and people are liking what they're seeing from Rosen. Even Josh Allen's got a couple of impressive wins, and so Broncos country, as in typical Broncos country fashion, at least of late, kind of getting on Bradley Chubb's case a little bit, or kind of knocking, well, yeah, he was never going to be as good as Khalil Mack, or he was never on par or the same prospect as Myles Garrett or whatever, kind of almost criticizing that pick. And I think it's nice to have kind of that vindicating moment for him, as far as, let's remember, like, this guy was a top 5 pick for a reason. And he showed a lot of those reasons why the Broncos prioritized him over a guy that we're going to see Thursday night in Josh Rosen, and over a Josh Allen who has, had the biggest arm in the draft and all the size and all the athleticism, everything that everybody's criticized Elway for really over prioritizing from quarterbacks. He passed up on that. He passed up on Rosen. He passed up on the chance to trade up for Darnold, because obviously that pick was for sale. And so, I don't know. For me, it was a great just reminder that we got ourselves a player in Chubb, and you build, like, this podcast is all about building the Broncos. And so that happens 1 year, one step, one pick at a time. And Bradley Chubb was the right pick, in my opinion. I think we're going to see a little bit more evidence of that on Thursday night against Rosen specifically, which will be cool to see. But I also was pretty stoked about I continue to be really impressed by Emmanuel Sanders. I think the last time I was on the podcast, we were kind of speculating it was kind of I believe it was near the end of the season last year, when we were talking kind of about just, what might happen in the offseason, or some players who may be in focus for the draft, or players who might get cut or traded. And Sanders was one of those guys who, he struggled through injury. He wasn't playing well because he was injured. And so it was kind of just, well, is the price really worth what he can give you production wise? But man, he's come out this year. He looks like a 26, 27-year-old Emmanuel Sanders out there, just making play after play. Even that penalty, which I thought was a bogus penalty, even that play, just an incredible catch, incredible over-the-shoulder catch, and then his touchdown late was just awesome. So, I love what I'm seeing from Emmanuel Sanders in terms of just anyone in general on the team who's standing out. Sanders is a guy for me I think he's probably the best player on the Broncos right now.
I have him on both my stock up and stock down a little bit because of that penalty, but like you said, it was a very ticky-tack call. Mm-hmm. I view it kind of like when Von Miller got flagged for doing the fake, hey, I'm going to help you up. Oh, a hand through the hair thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And just like, this is a joke. Like, oh, this is football. Have fun with it. Sometimes those guys get a little crazy. It's even Philip Lindsay when he got ejected.
Yeah, he's trying to punch the ball out,
Yeah, I don't know. It just, sometimes those officials get a little too trigger happy with the flag.
They do.
We were talking, Cam and I, before you came on, about Clay Matthews. And the guy touches a quarterback and he gets a flag. So it's thankfully our pass rushers haven't really got that this year.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know. It was tough just to see, because that's kind of been our offense this year, though, of we take one big step forward, like Emmanuel Sanders looking like he caught a touchdown, then, oh, no, it's called back. And we've had like 4 or 5 touchdowns this year called back that were very, very close, very controversial. And we've just been on the unlucky side of things this year. That's for sure.
Yeah, brutal. Absolutely brutal. And by the way, speaking of that Clay Matthews play, that it makes me wonder if the Broncos would have had any chance of winning the Super Bowl 50 year. I mean, with the way that they played defense, I just don't know if in today's NFL, I mean, just a couple years later, I don't know if that would have worked. So it's kind of crazy the way things work out and how things change so quickly in the NFL. But in today's rules, I don't know how that defense would have survived playing the way that it did, so physical as they were.
Definitely. All right, well, let's move down to the stock down part. Any players that really stood out that you're just like, man, really? Come on. You're a better player than this.
Well, for me, I don't know about better player, but it goes to the debate of, let's go ahead and bench Connor McGovern for Max Garcia. And we saw Max Garcia, be in the backfield a lot. And that was due to, Aaron Donald and, so that's going to happen. But it also should not have happened in the first place. I mean, you should have thrown Connor McGovern back there, and he should have been your starter from game one. And so it's understandable why Max Garcia's stock was down, in essence, in this game. And it also proved that whenever the Denver Broncos moved the ball successfully, it was always with Connor McGovern at the helm, or at least on that line down at the right guard. And it's unfortunate now that we have the season-ending injury with Ron O'Leary, because not only is it a stock down, but it's also a stock up again for Max Garcia to be put at the left guard or right guard or wherever they decide to put him. Because now we're going to get the opportunity to see Connor McGovern and Max Garcia for the foreseeable future this season. So we'll see what the chemistry might be against the Arizona Cardinals on a short week and against a pretty vaunting pass rush of Chandler Jones and amongst others. So it's a very interesting dynamic now, to where the Broncos, who had a really good chemistry on the offensive line with Ron O'Leary and Connor McGovern and Matt Paradis, now we're back to no chemistry in treating it a little bit like preseason all over again.
What about you, Sayre? Anybody stood out in a bad way?
Yeah, I'm going to sound really critical on this, and it's not usually my nature, but I'm really disappointed just in what we've seen, not even just this week against the Rams, but the whole season from Brandon Marshall and Todd Davis. I think that those two guys they're really letting me down in terms of Brandon Marshall was supposed to be kind of the leader of this Broncos defense, this really complete overall player who can cover, he can make tackles for loss. And then Todd Davis was pitched as this, great run stopper. And those guys, if ESPN is to be believed, their stats read that neither of those players has a single tackle for loss this year, not including sacks, which I believe Todd Davis was in on a sack at one point this year. And so that to me stands out as just a horrendous statistic. And you can see in the way that teams are running the ball all over the Broncos over the past week, they dropped from, I think, the top 15 to 32nd in the league in that category, by the way. And I think Marshall and Davis are a big reason why. It's because those guys are both not filling gaps and they're missing tackles. And right. that ticks me off more than anything watching the Broncos is missed tackles, because the nature of this defense, who these guys are, they formed this culture of toughness, physicality, speed, and those two guys are really, they're just getting washed out of plays easily.
Right.
And so I think to me they've been the most disappointing defenders on the Broncos roster thus far.
I was going to say that's probably in essence why you're seeing so much miscommunication, probably the key cause of the miscommunication, because typically the linebackers are the ones that are getting the calls in the huddle. And
Todd Davis is supposed to be that guy making the calls.
Right. And so there must be some sort of miscommunication there between Todd Davis and the rest of the guys, because, they're losing a lot of their discipline and a lot of the gap integrity and and, just at least, having not even their instincts take over, but just or having it go the wrong way, I should say. I mean, they're biting on play action. I mean, they're getting lost in coverage. It's it's
Josie time. Say it, Cam.
It's Josie time. I mean, we're getting to that point, and it isn't just Josie time as far as rookies, but we're getting to that point in time when you lose four games that you do need to start contemplating not just starting Jewel, but playing a lot of your playmaking rookies of the 2018 draft class.
I can't disagree. I mean, it's easy to see that, like you said, Sayre, that both those guys are getting washed out of the play. They can't get off blocks. They can't get there in time. They're not reading things right. And there's times the defensive line is doing their job. I think back to the Baltimore game where, who was it? Pecco had the play stopped in the backfield, and just the rest of the defenders just stopped. And all of a sudden the running back got loose and went from a third down and short stop to all of a sudden they had a first down. And you're not seeing that same fire like they used to have an identity. And this does happen. I mean, we lost Ward, we lost Talib. Those guys were big parts of that identity. But the young guys and some of the older guys really haven't lived up to taking that torch after those guys left. And it's a little disappointing to see some of the effort that's being put forth. But let's move on to our next segment here, and we call it forward progress versus loss of down. And essentially what this is Nick and I like to go through and just look at the team overall. What are some things team-wise that you can really take moving forward and say, okay, we need to see more of this moving forward, or, hey, man, maybe it can't be fixed this year, but this part of the game for the Broncos is just downright terrible. So is there anything forward progress-wise that you would say, hey, this is what I really need to see moving forward?
I Sayre knows I'm probably going to be sounding like a broken record at this point, but I need to see more Courtland Sutton. I need to see more Courtland Sutton. You the three of us were talking in the chat that we have, but it seems like the last handful of games, every single time they want to throw up the football to Courtland Sutton, he's either making a huge play, catching the football, or he's drawing a pass interference penalty. I mean, clearly there's a size disadvantage whenever he's on the field and cornerbacks are trying to cover Courtland Sutton. And as an offensive coordinator and as a quarterback, you need to realize that you have a absolute dynamic mismatch of Courtland Sutton. And I think that the Denver Broncos have to realize that they need to get the ball to Courtland Sutton maybe a little bit more than Demaryius Thomas. And so I think that this is why I think that he should be utilized more in the red zone. I mean, I appreciate recognizing a mismatch of Jeff Hireman in the end zone, against the 5'10" cornerback. I appreciate that, but I would much rather, for one, that throw be lower, and two, thrown in a different location.
Yeah,
and that's the thing for me is I would much rather it be utilized in your playmakers, and just in all honesty, I would say that, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about on our season preview, Carl, when you were on the Lockdown Broncos show, is that Courtland Sutton and Phillip Lindsay, they make this offense go, in my opinion. And you have to get, and they're both rookies, and so you have to get them the ball as often as you can.
Yeah, I can't disagree, and I'm with you on there that Case Keenum can't keep throwing it out of the end zone. that just stop. Oh my gosh, it's become a running joke now. He'll have one-on-one coverage. Like you said, you got a guy that's 6'5" going against a 5'10" defensive player. Give him a chance. Even if it's picked off, I'm sorry. I just want to see our guy have a chance. You got to take a few more risks if we're going to start winning some of these games.
Yeah, I would rather he had 12 interceptions at this point than to watch that ball sail 10 yards over Jeff Hireman's head. I couldn't care less about the interceptions. I think I would say, as far as forward progress, Chad Kelly's kneel down was one of the best plays I've seen all year. No, I'm just messing around.
Oh, man. You're going to get people fired up here.
Yeah, I know. In all seriousness, I love what I've seen. And we touched, Cam, you touched on this a little bit before as kind of a negative, but I really like what we've seen from the offensive line coaching. being able to really insert different guys into the lineup and not really skip a beat. And so specifically, you look at Billy Turner coming in and filling in at the right tackle spot. I feel like he's done a great job at that. And a lot of people kind of laughed at Vance Joseph when he said that he was confident in Billy Turner. And he's played really well. And I think that they've done a good job of also bringing in, even though the decision to bench McGovern was really dumb, in my opinion, I think that Max Garcia came in and did, he was okay. He wasn't,
it was a tough first.
He is what he is. Yeah, he is what he is in pass protection. I think he's always been a pretty good run blocker, but he is what he is in pass pro. He's kind of a sieve there, but they moved guys around. They've had to deal with Bowles going down with I think he has an ankle that he's kind of struggling with, and so there's just been a number of situations where they've had to do some shuffling, and I think that the two guys, I think it's Strasser and Googler that they have on the offensive line, just in the coaching department there. Those two guys have done a really good job, in my opinion. So I say that's the offensive line coaching has been an issue to me over the past few years. I'd say that's taken a definite step forward in 2018.
I'm hoping if we bring in a new coaching staff this offseason, I don't want to get into that too much because I don't want to have given up on this season yet. But I'm hoping those guys stay. Yeah. If there is a coaching change, because like you said, I really think they're doing a great job. I think having two guys, one teaching the inside, one teaching the outside guys is awesome. That was a genius innovation. And just so our listeners know, that did come from Vance Joseph. I know we got a lot of Vance Joseph haters out there, but he has done some good things.
He really has. I think that's an underrated part of this season, Carl. I really do, because Joseph, as much as I hate some of the decisions that he does make, like Devontae Booker getting 98 pass snaps, some of the detail stuff that he took care of this offseason, bringing in the double offensive line coaches. He also doubled up on defensive backs coaches, and he brought in Tom McMahon to coach the special teams, who, by the way, you haven't heard anything negative about the special teams yet this year. And Brandon McManus had a clear problem last year that was obviously fixed. He's perfect this season. So Joseph does deserve some kudos for what he's doing. And obviously the players are part of the not finishing of the games lately, but I think he has made some strides in terms of just general being able to see the big picture and fixing some bigger problems.
Well, no, and I agree. I think overall the offensive line has been better this year. I just think that the whole Garcia and McGovern thing was just sort of like a tipping point just for me a little bit, just because there was so much camaraderie with the line when McGovern was there. And so, we're sort of getting back to that splitting reps thing. And that's why I just had a little bit of an issue with it. But we're going to get back to the camaraderie a little bit on that line. And it's unfortunate that Leary is out for the season, but it's going to afford Garcia to gain necessary reps and become, better at his craft as a pass blocker, run blocker, the whole deal. So I think it's going to be very beneficial for Garcia because, he definitely was thrown into the wolves, to put it, like that. He was thrown into the wolves to face Aaron Donald, in his first start in quite a while. And that's no tall order. Aaron Donald, Ndamukong Suh, what better thing could you ever ask for a guy still? So you can understand why the Broncos were so successful, I guess, a little bit when Connor McGovern was in there, just because he had the majority of the reps throughout the season. But I would expect a little bit better play from Max Garcia as the season wore on, because he's going to see plenty of time there. Now, the one interesting one will be, do they put or consider Billy Turner at guard if Max Garcia is not going to be available or for a certain situation or whatever?
All right. Well, let's. I'm just going to put this out there for the loss of down because we're running a little bit long here. But of course, the obvious one is run defense. The Broncos are breaking records and not good records with their run defense right now. So I think that's pretty much the obvious choice. They got to get some things figured out. We've already talked about some different players and things going on. But I want to keep going here, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that, sure, watching football is fun, but it's more entertaining when you have some action on the games. Guys, you've heard us talking on this show for about the last few weeks. and some of you are still on the sidelines. Whether you're an expert or a rookie, you should be betting at MyBookie. If you're the kind of guy that likes to bet a little and win a lot, like playing the numbers on roulette, you can create a big parlay. Pick 3 teams to win, and if you hit all 3, you could turn $100 into $600. There's so much to bet on: playoff baseball, hockey, primetime fights, and more. But MyBookie is the one bet I know you'll be happy with all year. I recommend these guys because I really trust them. MyBookie has been in business for years. They've got great online reviews, and their mobile site is easy to use. If you're on the sidelines, now is the time to get in the game. MyBookie will still match your first deposit dollar for dollar, but you got to join now because they'll be pulling that offer. Log on to MyBookie right now and double your money. Use promo code Broncos100 and you'll get your first deposit matched 100%. That's promo code Broncos100. You play, you win, and you get paid. All right, well, it's now time to focus on the upcoming game, the Arizona Cardinals, and this is kind of an interesting one. Both teams trying to figure out what they're doing moving forward, and are going to be doing a lot of different kind of evaluations in this kind of game. But let's start with the roster of the Arizona Cardinals. Is there anybody here on this offense that really kind of stands out to you that definitely deserves some time here, just talking about them individually?
David Johnson is, former MVP candidate. And I think the biggest thing with this offense is you gotta, I just kind of laugh a little bit because the Cardinals fans, the Cardinals faithful, are experiencing the fullness of Mike McCoy. and he's really stifled David Johnson. It sounds like he's got, just a few runs of 20 or more yards. He's obviously not putting up the same numbers that he was when Bruce Arians was there. And so he's definitely a guy that's probably looking to have a big day against the Denver defense that's given up about 8,000 yards on the ground the last 2 games.
Is that it?
But that's, it's, give or take.
Yeah.
But he's definitely the focal for me on this offense. He can do it all. We saw him. He played at Northern Iowa, and he played against the Iowa Hawkeyes, and I'll never forget this guy just blazing down the field, 80-plus yards against the Iowa defense, thinking, who the heck is this guy from Northern Iowa that's destroying my Hawkeyes right now? And it turned out it was David Johnson, and now here he is. He's a legitimate franchise back, and he's a superstar, man.
Yeah, I kind of have to continue that because, you really can't ignore the elephant in the room, and that's our run defense of when you give up, like you said, 8,000 yards, rushing, give or take a few tackles for loss here and there. But he's a great back, and, and a little bit of some qualifiers. I guess it really wasn't the whole, giving up the 200 to Todd Gurley because that's Todd Gurley. He's the best offensive player probably in football. It's just more the Isaiah Crowell that they gave up with 200 yards. That's probably why I'm more seething about the run defense in all intents and purposes. But and who knows ultimately what the true identity will be like on Thursday, because in essence it's a great competing identity of what the offensive coordinators of Bill Musgrave and Mike McCoy are doing. Because, what Bill Musgrave is doing, in essence, is paralleling what Mike McCoy has done last year. And we'll see ultimately what Mike McCoy will do on Thursday, because the smart thing and the smart betting money would be to run the ball 25 to 30 times with your best, backs and split reps, in essence, if you're the Broncos, with Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. So that would be the best bet. But if you're also David Johnson, you're licking your chops. You're absolutely licking your chops. But there's the one guy that I think would be underrated for me, and I guess I want to continue the rookie trend, but is Christian Kirk. Just kind of how versatile he is in the special teams area and as a receiver. He's absolutely deadly when he has the ball in his hands.
Yeah, he's definitely a good player. I will add to the David Johnson conversation, the only thing about licking your chops is you also have the worst run blocking offensive line in football in front of him. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a weakness against weakness here, I guess I'd say. Yeah. We'll see who breaks on that end. But you're right, Christian Kirk, he's a guy that we talked on this show quite a bit before the draft, and a guy that I liked. I didn't know how quickly he could reach top ability, I guess is what I would say, because he was more of a playmaker because of his athleticism than he was because of just great technique or anything like that while he was in college. But he's definitely done pretty well for them so far. We'll get into the stats here in a little bit, but he's leading the team in receiving so far, even over the great Larry Fitzgerald, the timeless Larry Fitzgerald. He's one of those guys I am absolutely going to miss when he leaves the league. He is maybe my favorite non-Bronco to ever play in football. Just
against Pittsburgh. I mean, that the plays that he made in that game, I was actually bummed. That's the first time I've been bummed that another team I didn't care about lost a game.
Yeah, there was a lot in that Super Bowl. I mean, you had Kurt Warner going for his second Super Bowl. I mean, you had, and probably should have won. I mean, if Ralph Brown deflects that pass in the end zone to Santonio Holmes, the Arizona Cardinals were Super Bowl champions. I mean, it was a great Super Bowl.
Yeah, I just love Larry Fitzgerald. He's had one of the worst quarterback situations most of his career, and you've never heard that guy complain once. He just goes out there, does his job. I've seen him in the offseason help other wide receivers to become better receivers, kind of like Von Miller running the pass rush camp now. There's now an offensive line camp that's being done. That's kind of cool. But no, I mean, this guy has been just a class act his entire time. And I'm excited to see him on Thursday. Hope he doesn't do great against us, but again, just the chance to get to see a legend play in the game. And guys like Christian Kirk should be very, very appreciative that they're getting this chance to play with him right now.
I was going to say, as much as I love the fact that Peyton Manning signed with the Denver Broncos, and I trust me, I love it. I mean, I have a jersey and hanging up in my room. I love it. It would have been great if he signed with the Arizona Cardinals just to see potentially what he would have done with Larry Fitzgerald.
I bet they would have averaged about 15 touchdowns a year between the two of them.
Give or take.
Yeah. But all right, let's move on to the defense here, because this is by far the better unit and the few more playmaking names among the Arizona Cardinals. This is actually I'd say a very underrated unit. They're not talked about much because, well, the Cardinals aren't a very relevant team right now. But just looking through this list, again, any names that really stick out to you?
Yeah. How about Chandler Jones, man?
I was going to say, I mean, that's the big red blinking light. Like, this is the guy. Watch this guy.
Yeah. How sweet that one is, because Bill Belichick rightfully gets a lot of credit for being a great coach, but he doesn't get a lot of flack for being a pretty bad general manager over the past 5 years. And trading Chandler Jones is one of the worst moves I can remember, just in general in the NFL. He's a premier pass rusher. He affects games. He's not one of a kind, because there's better players than him, but I mean, he's perfect for what the Cardinals have needed. Prior to his arrival, their pass rush was no good. And so he's really elevated that defense just as a whole. He's kind of done on a maybe lesser level, but at the same time, he's had quite an impact there. Kind of like what Khalil Mack is doing for the Chicago Bears right now. He kind of did that for the Arizona Cardinals a little bit, just elevating the play of everyone else around him. So he's a big time playmaker.
Yeah, and it definitely doesn't hurt when you have Patrick Peterson down there and Deion Buchanan and Hassan Reddick still, with the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, the loss of Tyrann Mathieu hurts, but I mean, still losing Tyrann Mathieu and Tony Jefferson, the Arizona Cardinals, I mean, they are one of the more, I should say, many underrated defenses that's in the NFL. And so despite the fact and despite the record, I mean, Arizona still very well might be a little bit of a hard team to move the ball against, just because of how well they are up front. And we've seen Case Keenum hold the ball too long. And so if you're Chandler Jones, I mean, you have to take advantage of that.
I want to throw a name out here to you guys, just because I think he is one of the most underrated players on this team. And I think part of it is people just don't want to say his name, but Bené Benwikere. Did I say that right?
That was good, man.
Okay, I'll take it. Okay, Bené Benwikere. He's the cornerback opposite of Patrick Peterson, of course, but he's been in the top 10 in quarterback rating allowed thrown his way.
Really?
Yep.
I did not know that.
I know. I just in doing research this week for this game, I saw that and I was like, oh my gosh, really? But But it's true. I mean, this cornerback tandem is very, very underrated in what they're doing. Patrick Peterson was in the top 10 as well. And so, I mean, this is one of those games. This is not an easy defense. They have playmakers on that defensive line. I watched the Vikings game, and given the Vikings don't have a great pass blocking offensive line, but they were making life very, very difficult there in Viking land.
Yeah, the underrated guy certainly to keep an eye on that defensive line is obviously Robert Nkemdiche. The guy that really busted out onto that scene. I think it was this preseason. I think he was, people were, I think, coming out of Ole Miss, people were talking about his effort, talking about, does he take plays off? Is he, too inconsistent? But I mean, you
take plays off.
Oh yeah. But I mean, you turn the tape on. I mean, he was, when it clicked, it was kind of like Jadeveon Clowney, I guess, in some ways. Mm-hmm. But when it was on, I mean, he was an animal. He was an animal. Yeah.
I always think of Malik McDowell. When he wanted to be an all-star player, he was definitely an all-star player, but it just wasn't all the time. And with Nkemdiche, the other big issue was he just had terrible awareness. There were times he would break into the backfield, and then he'd get back there and go, "Oh, who has the ball?" And I'm just like, the guy would be standing right next to him going, "Please don't see me. Please don't see me. Hope your vision's based on movement." and he wouldn't be able to make the plays. So, I mean, it was always kind of that, can this guy have his athleticism or have his technique meet up with his athleticism? And I think this is a year where he's finally starting to put some of that together. And definitely a guy that you got to watch out for on the inside. And he's going to have some matchup opportunities. I mean, we saw what obviously the LA Rams were able to do against our guards. And some of these guys, Corey Peters is another one. I thought he's had a pretty decent season so far this year as well. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty good defense. And I'm interested to see a little bit on with a Thursday night game. It's always tough injury wise of who's actually going to play, who's not going to play. I've seen some of the injury reports. There are some players I'm not sure if Iopati is going to play in this one. Has anybody heard anything on that?
Does he ever play anymore? That guy's always injured.
That is true.
No, I don't mean that. I guess that was pretty harsh. I'm sure he's a good guy.
But yeah, I mean, it's a roster that's coming around. It's definitely going to depend on being able to surround Josh Rosen with a little bit more talent there on the offense, especially offensive line wise. They don't have much right now. So as Von Miller said today, they're going to go out there and kick some. We'll keep it PG.
I get the impression that the Cardinals are tanking, and so I think they'll try to be competitive for a while, and then I don't think they'll let the Broncos win, but I get the impression that they're trying to get one of those star pass rushers from this draft to go on the opposite side of Josh Rosen here.
Yeah. Oh boy. All right. Well, let's just take a look a little bit here at their season so far. Just looking at their game by game breakdown. They start off season losing to Washington 24-6, and of course losing to the Rams 34-0. And they started playing a little bit better here against Chicago in week 3, losing 16-14, Seattle 20-17. Got their first win at San Fran 28-18. That was a good game for Josh Rosen. And then this last week at Minnesota, lost 27-17. And so again, this is not a good team, but the Broncos are not a good team. And Thursday nights are always they're a toss-up game. You never quite know where they're going to go.
It stinks to be that. It stinks to be one of those teams where we can't even pencil in wins anymore.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh yeah, we got that Cardinals game. Like the Broncos are better than the Cardinals, obviously. No, we're not. We're not on that level anymore. We're at the level of the Cardinals.
Yep.
Yeah, let alone unpredictable, because it's the ones where it's like, sure, we could win this game on Thursday night, but then the minute you start thinking of, hey, we actually might win, then you start thinking of, oh, you know what, of what happened last week, and it's like, okay, maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately in the NFL, there's just going to be those times you're gonna have to rebuild. You always have your windows that open up, And right now the Broncos are not at a window opportunity. And so now they got to build for a window opportunity. You talked about with Bradley Chubb. Was he the wrong pick? Well, he's a piece that adds for the future, not just this year.
Mm-hmm.
And you hope that he can turn into that consistent Pro Bowl, all-pro kind of player for you. And obviously the Broncos thought he could be that kind of talent for him, and especially this draft. I mean, if the Broncos could put two drafts together like they had this one, I mean, it's going to be hard to put two drafts like this one together. But you put that kind of depth on the team, then things start to begin to change. So it's just we'll kind of see. This is a little bit of a test to see. I mean, can the Broncos beat a bad team? We'll have to see here. But just to kind of give you some team stats, just to give a little bit of picture of what they are. Total offense, they rank 32nd, so worst in the league. Points per game, 31st. They only get 13.7 points per game.
Wow.
That's not good. I can't believe somebody's worse than that.
Yeah.
We gotta force some turnovers in this game then.
Yep.
That's gotta happen.
Yeah. Passing yards, they're 31st, rushing 32nd in both yards and yards per attempt. So this is a really bad offense. If our defense stinks against this offense, I said this against the Jets on this show. So I feel like I really cursed us. So I'm going to try to be hesitant on some of that. But again, if our defense can't stop them, that's on our defense. I mean, this shouldn't be one of those games where they really struggle to stop somebody. If you can stop the Rams from getting 30 points and the Chiefs from getting all those points, you should be able to stop the Cardinals. That's what drives me crazy.
Well, and you got to back it up too now with your talk because of what, Vaughn said today. I mean, if he really said that, that we're going to kick their booty, go do it.
Right.
I mean, you have to make sure you strip sack Josh Rosen. He's a rookie, so you gotta. If you're, Joe Woods, you gotta dial up a heck of a lot of pressure on Josh Rosen. He's a pocket passer, so you gotta just make sure that he can, throw an errant pass every once in a while, and maybe see if it's an interception. But you gotta get to him and get to him as often as you can. And so hopefully that this with Bradley Chubb and Von Miller game that they had against the Los Angeles Rams was the side of things to come. Because if it is, then the offensive tackles of not just the Arizona Cardinals, but all the other teams ahead of them, they're going to be fearing for their life because of what's coming at them.
Well, yeah, I mean the Rams honestly have, I would say, the best offensive line in football this year.
Yeah, I mean Andrew Whitworth has been playing pretty darn well.
Yeah,
and Bradley Chubb. Yeah, threw him well.
Didn't the Broncos get more sacks against them than any other team this year? If I remember hearing that.
And it was, I think the highest was 2 or 3 sacks before the Broncos came into town.
That's a notch on our belt.
Boom. And we just need to do it every week.
Guess who took over some play calling duties on defense last week? I'm just saying.
What?
Joe Woods?
I'm just saying. All I'm saying is I'm just saying.
Yep,
I'm not a Vance Joseph apologist either. I'm just saying the guy, he's not as incompetent as people make him out to be. He's made some bad decisions, rookie mistakes, but I mean, the proof is in the pudding. 5 sacks, held the Rams to their lowest point output of the season. It's there.
I mean, stopped them when we went on that 17-3 run. Mm-hmm. I mean, theoretically, probably
we won that game 17-3.
Exactly.
Oh man! All right. Well, I want to throw out some interesting stats, just because these always kind of amaze me. Maybe not everybody else, but no quarterback has had more drop passes per attempt than Josh Rosen this season.
Love it.
So it shows again just the lack of talent around the guy, and this is something for Mr. Musgrave to remember this week. The Cardinals have allowed 291 yards off screen passes, most in the NFL. So if you're going to beat this defense, sometimes they can get a little over-aggressive, and you can get them a little over the top of taking it over the top of their defensive line for a screen pass. But I also want to throw out there, Patrick Peterson has allowed the 3rd lowest quarterback rating so far this year.
Which is understandable. I mean, yeah, he's good.
He's a very talented player.
We're going after Benet. Say his name again. Benet. That's who we're going after.
Benet. Yep.
Benet. We're gonna go have some beignets.
There you go. Perfect. All right. Well, let's switch up here a little bit and look at some key matchups in this game. And we've already kind of talked about this first one a little bit. David Johnson versus the Broncos front 7. 2 straight games giving up 200 plus yards rushing. Even against Chiefs, gave up some really, really big plays. And David Johnson's one of those guys. You miss one tackle, this guy makes you pay. Mm-hmm. And I would sit there and say he's a top 3 running back. Unfortunately, he has the worst offensive line in front of him. And it kind of shows a little bit of even having a valuable running back doesn't always mean great things for your offense.
Well, is it the bad offensive line or the fact that he has an offensive coordinator that loves to throw it all over the yard?
Well, and I would add, I guess, a little bit of watching McCoy's offense. Watching the Cardinals, it is the most boring offense to watch in football.
Is it still run, pass? Is he still?
There's a lot of that. There's just nothing fancy. There's nothing to make a defense have to go, oh, we got to prepare for these extra things. Like the Chiefs. You got to worry about guys coming across the field, those little dump off passes, those quick little toss. Oh, I'm going to toss a 1 yard and make it a 50-yard pass. You don't have to worry about any of those kind of things. You don't have to worry about any creative thinking. The Rams, again, you got guys moving all over the place. So you got to stay disciplined on the backside because somebody could be coming out of nowhere. Nope, nothing like that for the Cardinals.
Wow.
So it's very, very boring.
I was just going to say, look at the Chargers since McCoy left and look at Denver, even as inept as we've been in the red zone and kind of, you mentioned those touchdowns that have been called back. I mean, look at the places that he's been in recent years. He's not adapting to the new age of NFL offenses. And it's kind of embarrassing to think that we so highly prioritized bringing him in last year.
It really is. It almost as if McCoy is living in the past when he was back with Peyton Manning or when he was successful for that season with Phillip Rivers. I mean, I think he's living in this day and age where you can throw it 50 to 60 times and expect to win a ball game. And
it's one of those. He's had some quarterbacks that could overcome an inept play caller. Kind of like at times, I know a lot of Green Bay fans have complained about their coach and saying that pretty much Aaron Rodgers makes that offense go despite bad play calling. And I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but there are times where it looks like it's a pretty boring offense and you just kind of expect, well, Aaron Rodgers is going to be Aaron Rodgers. Mm-hmm. And when you don't have that kind of quarterback, well, then play calling really comes into play. And so it's not been all that fancy, but again, with the Broncos, with how undisciplined they've been in a lot of things. I was telling somebody earlier today, watching the Broncos versus Rams game, I was very, very impressed with the play calling on defense.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I thought they had a great game plan. I thought especially the defensive line, they had great ideas of how they were going to rush the quarterback, get pressure on him, how they were going to cover in the back end. I mean, like I said, we held them to their lowest point total of the season. Yes, we gave up 200 yards rushing, but I put that more on players just not doing their job. Yeah. We had 8 missed tackles in that game, and guys just out of position, guys trying to guess and jump inside, getting beat then to the outside. And so it's kind of, I mean, I know it's that stupid saying, but do your job.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it here. And so this front seven, I mean, Elway calling them soft this week.
I love it.
That's a pretty big statement. I hope those guys take that very, very serious.
Well, and it's not the first time he said it either. I mean, he said it last year too, and they took offense to it. This year, it seems like they didn't take offense to it because they've given up 200 yards on the ground, so there's nothing you can say about it. So I like the fact that he came out and said that they're soft, and the fact that and who knows if the Broncos will be able to back it up, but I like the fact that Von Miller came out and said that we're going to kick their butt on Thursday, because we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that the last few weeks where we've seen players spoke openly and say that, we're going to be that team that we sought out to be. And maybe that isn't a tribute to where the defense is, at least with Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, that maybe that their confidence is now at that high. So we'll just ultimately see what happens. But defensively, though, it was a really good game plan. It is worth maybe throwing out, I guess, that when not to say that maybe an injury sort of threw the offense out of its alignment with the Rams, but when Cooper Kupp was hurt, it seemed like it sort of threw the entire offensive rhythm and everything with the Los Angeles Rams out of whack.
Yeah, hard to disagree with that. But let's move on to our second key matchup in this game. And we've already talked about this guy a lot, but the guy he's going to be matched up against most in this game, Chandler Jones versus Garrett Bowles.
Boy.
And there's a lot of Bronco fans that are ready to give up on Garrett Bowles and say that he's a bust and all those kind of things. Well, in comes Chandler Jones, one of the better pass rushers in football. How do you think this matchup's going to go?
Over under how many holding penalties will be called?
Jeez.
I mean, that's the appropriate question. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, if Garrett Bowles wants to come out and prove to the national TV audience that, you know, that he is a capable left tackle and that he, you know, is capable of being at this level, then he has to stop Chandler Jones. It's just as simple as that.
I'm just going to throw this out there because I know Garrett Bowles gets he's getting a lot of smack talked about him right now, but he's only given up 1 sack this year. And the name of the game for his job, as far as I'm concerned, is making sure that his quarterback doesn't get hurt. I know that some of his holding penalties have cost the Broncos in terms of field position and potentially even points, which is inexcusable. And his technique has to be better, no question about it. But he's only let his quarterback get hit twice, sacked once. And as far as I'm concerned, you're keeping that quarterback healthy. You'll take that holding penalty every now and again because it's not necessarily Bowles' fault that Bill Musgrave is calling 5 and 7 step drops in obvious pass situations. And so these pass rushers are taking easy pass to the quarterback, and there's only so much Bowles can do about it, especially when you combine those deep drops with Case Keenum holding the ball for 10 seconds. And it just, to me, I know that Bowles is catching a lot of the blame. And rightly so. I mean, he has had plays where his technique has looked bad, but you look at 5 accepted penalties in 5 games. I mean, how many times have we looked at the guy blocking Von Miller and said, "Oh, Bond's getting held. Oh, Bond's getting held. Bond's getting held," and it never gets called. And so, and I think what Vance Joseph said this week was right. Bowles' holding call this past week was kind of bogus, and so. You look at it in that way. I think that Mark Schlereth has done a good job of making Bowles kind of the GOAT in Broncos country right now. I'm sure there's multiple guys, but I don't expect it to go great against Chandler Jones just because I don't think the Broncos are scheming well offensively right now, and I don't think Musgrave is really making the correct adjustments, and so I honestly don't anticipate that change, and I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not usually a skeptic like that, but Bill Musgrave has not impressed so far this season, and I think he's kind of costing Garrett Bowles a little bit lately.
Yeah. There was the 4th and 3 play.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember that one, they had trips receivers, I think, to the left, and all 3 ran deep routes on a 4th and 3.
Horrible.
What is and they're bringing a blitz. So you should have hot routes built into the offense to say, okay, they're bringing a blitz. Let's throw it right behind where they're blitzing. And there was just no adjustments for that. So, yeah, I agree. Sometimes it is more the offensive scheme, and it's always complementary football. It's never just one guy that's made a huge mistake. A lot of times it's a group of things. Or if things go well, it's a group of things working together. And with Garrett Bowles, like you said, there's times where Case Keenum's just holding on to the ball forever. And then there's those times where he runs out to the left, nobody's open, and he takes a 14-yard sack when he should have just thrown it away.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's plays like that you can't really put on Bowles. I'm not saying that he's been perfect by any means. Like you said, he's had plenty of holding calls. He's got to work on some technique things. But I really do think, like you said, some Bronco media have made him the scapegoat on everything that's going wrong with the offense, and it's not just him.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely some things that need to be done there. But sticking with the offensive line versus defensive line here, I have Robert Kimdichie versus our guards. And with Leary gone, so Garcia's in, and that scares me. It really does. I think if the Broncos are going to lose this game, it's because they get a couple really bad turnovers or a couple really big-time drive stalling plays that end up happening, like a big sack up the middle. And Kimdichie is one of those guys. He can wreck a game plan pretty quickly. And so I guess my question to you guys here with this one is this one of those guys that maybe the Broncos should decide, hey, let's just double team this guy and not let him be the guy that beats us?
Well, the issue with that is then you're looking at Chandler Jones being matched up one-on-one with Garrett Bowles. And, I mean, that just I don't know. It just depends on the flow of the game. And it all depends on what certainly happens. And if he's certainly suspect that Robert Nkemdiche is taking over a game, then, yeah, you probably need to double team him. Or consider, a possible substitution at that point, or double teams, or it's all going to be present on things that certainly arise during a game. But I think ultimately, if you do double team him, though, you're going to neutralize him, but you're also going to open up the doors for, a lot of their other guys. I mean, in particular, Chandler Jones.
Yeah, the key here is going to be that the Broncos make sure the Cardinals defense doesn't know what's coming. And that's been one of Bill Musgrave's biggest issues so far this year. And over the course of the past couple of years, it feels like the Broncos have just been way too predictable offensively because all these defenders are having career games against Denver. And it doesn't make any sense. And you wonder why that happens. And it's because it's so predictable that even a guy like Nkemdiche, who's had issues with effort in the past or technique or just consistency in general, it's why we're even talking about him as being a potential first round, nearly a first round bust going into this year, where we're talking about him being an issue against even Max Garcia. And so I really feel like if the offense can find a way to just keep them guessing at least, and not let him pin his ears back and really just he could really wreck a game if he's not guessing, if he's just going after it and playing instinctively, then Nkemdiche is going to have a huge game against Garcia. But if the Broncos can find a way to just keep him off balance, keep the running game moving, make sure he doesn't know what's coming, whether run or pass, I think that even he and Chandler Jones can be neutralized a bit in that regard, as we saw, multiple times in Broncos versus Patriots games.
All right, well, let's get to one of our final segments here, because we kind of started talking about there a little bit, and that's what we like to call the coaching corner, where we decide to become the coaches of the Broncos and show that we know more than they do. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I feel that way because it just seems like it's so obvious.
Yeah,
averaging over 5 yards a carry. Oh, we're not going to run the football. Right?
No.
Yeah, but
you want
anyway.
Devontae Booker on the field.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, well, we're going to start with the Broncos defense versus the Cardinals offense. Maybe give me one big thing that you would work to try to take advantage of this kind of matchup.
I don't know. I think that for me, it's just they got to make sure that, for one, Bradley Roby has to be on his A game. And if he's matched up against Christian Kirk, which is probable, maybe not possible, but it is probable, as Johnny Depp says, I think that, he has to be on his A game. He actually had a pretty darn good game after the first and second drive, I would say, and at least the first and part of the second quarter. He actually played pretty well, once the Broncos went on their comeback. So he's got to match up pretty well against Christian Kirk. I mean, he's obviously athletic. He's fast enough. I think between both of them, because Roby can, if he's on his game, he's a really good gambling corner. And that certainly, I think bodes well as far as the matchup between Christian Kirk and Roby. And we'll see if that happens. But if they, move it around necessarily, or move Christian Kirk around maybe as a weapon, and you start seeing Tremaine Brock on Christian Kirk, then I might start crying, just because I don't know if he can keep up with him.
I think for me, this is all about diversifying pressure, tight man coverage, forced turnovers. You're playing a rookie quarterback who has a struggling offensive line, who, like you said, his receivers are dropping passes, which means that he probably doesn't, even if he won't say it, he probably doesn't trust all the guys that he's throwing to. And so diversify the pressure, get him rattled early, force turnovers, and play tight man coverage. It seems so simple. Force the game into Josh Rosen's hands. You can't let if David Johnson beats the Broncos, then Vance Joseph does deserve to be fired. And your next episode should be about who's going to be replacing him, because It can't be the David Johnson show. It can't be a repeat of. I mean, they just let Sam Darnold pick his spots. In that Jets game, it was embarrassing because he's a rookie quarterback and he didn't even have to complete. He didn't even have to complete 15 passes. He could have won that game just handing the ball off every single play. And so they can't. They've learned. They've had an experience where a rookie quarterback was able to have a field day, and so they can't let it happen again. Whatever it takes. I don't care if it takes benching Brandon Marshall because I'm so sick of seeing those linebackers get washed out of plays. So defensively, you got to play tough. You got to play physical, diversify the pressure, confuse the quarterback, and force the game into his hands.
I mean, you put it bluntly when you wrote your article, Sayre, it isn't just one thing that needs to be done. I mean, it's a multitude of things. I mean, on the offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball, I mean, it's a multitude of things. And I'm with you. I mean, I've been driving that Josie Jewell train and ever since he was drafted, but still, the Broncos do need to start contemplating whether or not Josie Jewell needs to become that starter.
It's tough when he has a $8 million a year linebacker in front of him. But like you said, when he's out playing that guy, it's hard to argue with trying to put Josie Jewell in there. And he's a bigger guy.
Yep.
Need a little bit more size to hold up there in the run game. I mean, like you said, Brandon Marshall's just getting washed out of plays. Mm-hmm. You got a 225-pound linebacker going against a 320-pound tackler guard.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious who's going to win that matchup. And it just when he said he lost a lot of weight this offseason, I was like, oh, no. Our run defense is going to be bad. And it's been that way. And even Todd Davis, I don't know what's happened in his run defense this year, but he's not getting to the spot like he's been in the past. But let's switch over then to the Broncos offense versus the Cardinals defense, because this is the tougher matchup. I think the Broncos defense, I think they can do enough to keep the score pretty low. But Broncos offense versus Cardinals defense, what would you do if you were an offensive coordinator? If you were Bill Musgrave for a day, what would you do in this one to really make some plays?
Well,
something.
Yeah.
Bill Musgrave for a day. To call the plays one time to get to call the plays and just finally this is what should have been done, like you said, this is where we talk about we know better than the Broncos. And I think that this is the one area where fans are really justified is on the offense, the offensive side of the ball. We have the personnel that we need. Case Keenum is capable of playing well. He's capable of winning games in the NFL. We saw it last year. The Vikings didn't go to the NFC Championship game despite Case Keenum. They went, largely because of him. He was playing great football. And the Broncos were really, really excited to get this guy, and now they're doing all the things that he's bad at offensively. And it starts with not sticking with the running game and not pounding it. Royce Freeman having 60 I don't even know if he has 60 carries, but he's been on the field for 60 run plays this year through the first 6 games. It's 10 plays per game, and he's the team's best running back. And it doesn't make sense to me that you would have your best running back on the unit that's averaging, 5.3 yards per carry. You're not giving that guy enough snaps. It doesn't make any sense. And the Broncos, I think, this offseason hired a bunch of new people to be part of an analytics team. I know that they had Alex Tanney or Mitch Tanney or whoever. Well, Mitch Tanney's the trick shot quarterback. It's Alex Tanney who they had in the analytics department. But somebody in the analytics department has got to be doing PFF on steroids and figuring out that these guys have, here's what you're exploiting and here's what you're doing on game days. And it's 6 games into the season and you're still doing the thing that's not working every single game. And so somebody's got to be telling him that that's what's going on. But the Broncos are getting these big chunk plays like I've never seen in my life. How many 40-plus yard plays did they just have I think they almost doubled their season total this last game in 40-plus yard plays, and they're one of the best in the NFL at 20-plus yard plays. So this offense is breaking off big chunks, and they're just not sticking to the ground game when they need to, and that's what's killing them right now.
Well,
I was thinking, I think it was the Chiefs game? I think it was. Anyway, there was a couple times where the running game did get stalled on first down, where it only went for a yard or 2. Mm-hmm. And instead of, hey, you know what? The run game's been averaging 8-9 yards a carry. let's run it on second down. Let's get ourselves either a third and short or another first down. It was, we have second and long. We got to pass it.
Right.
And then it just completely destroyed the drive. And it's just like, no, if it's working, don't let just one play of them getting stopped stop you from doing it.
Right.
And it felt like that way against the Rams. Run game got kind of stifled a little bit early in the game. And it's not like we fell behind that bad early on. I mean, it was a one-score game for a long time. But yet they just abandoned it very, very early in that game. And it was very frustrating. You use that run game, set up the play action, which is one of Case Keenum's biggest strengths. I keep saying that every week on the show. Run more play action. And the other big strength that he is, I think, 9th or 10th in the league right now in quarterback rating outside the pocket. So as bad as he's been, there have been some good parts to his game. It's just the Broncos aren't doing enough of it. Yeah. You look at Patrick Mahomes in that Chiefs versus Broncos game and how often he was outside the pocket. You can do it. There's ways to scheme getting your quarterback and moving him around and giving him some extra time. And he's a little bit shorter guy, so sometimes getting outside the pocket makes you a little bit more comfortable, lets you see the field a little bit better. There's just obvious things that the Broncos don't seem to get right now.
Yeah, Case Keenum is not your typical quarterback as far as in order for him to get into a rhythm. And in order for him to get into a rhythm, you have to establish the running game. And if you establish the running game, the play action will come into play because Case Keenum is sort of that play action rhythm quarterback to where he is at his best when you are playing play action and you're running, in essence, short passes off of that play action so that he can get comfortable. That's basically where the Broncos have been missing it because when Case Keenum is rattled or he's flustered, he's just not comfortable, and the Broncos are not running the type of offense that needs to be done. It's spooky. Sayre, you and I, we're talking obviously back and forth about it, but I mean, 51 attempts like a week ago and 17 rushing attempts the last 2 weeks. That's not going to get the job done. And you have to run the football effectively. You have to unleash Phillip Lindsay in the passing game more. You have to the 6 catches for 48 yards. That's fantastic. But he also should be running the ball about 10 carries a game, while Royce Freeman is averaging about 15 to 20 carries a game. I mean, so that ultimately is the best part about this offense, because if you are running the football effectively, it's going to set up everything in your offense to the point where, players will be open because of that play action. They can maybe run some screen plays more effectively because they're going to be selling out the run. I mean, it's just so ultimately I think ultimately the coaches, and then maybe in particular Bill Musgrave, are just outthinking themselves of in essence what could be. I mean, because I think Bill Musgrave's a brilliant offensive mind. It's just I just think that he's just outthinking himself, putting him in situations where he really shouldn't even be in the first place.
Yeah, I go back and forth on Bill Musgrave and what he brings on a regular basis. I mean, I look at guys like McVay, DiFilippo. I always get that name wrong. You got some innovative minds in football. The college ranks, I think they have some of the best offensive minds around because they know how to use their talent and they design their offense to really take advantage of matchups and set things up easy for their quarterback. And there's just a lot of those old school guys still in the NFL that are lagging behind, and the guys that are willing to adapt and, like I said, design their offense around their playmakers. Andy Reid, he has been one of the best offensive minds in a long time. And he's finally found his quarterback that he even plays even better for his kind of unique play calling, I guess I would call it. And so I don't know, Bill Musgrave, there's times, like you said, we got weapons here. This is probably some of the best weapons the Broncos have had since 2013.
Or I was going to say 2008, maybe.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember back. I mean,
Brandon
it's been
Marshall,
a while.
Jacob Scheffler, yeah.
There's some there, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of unique weapons. They got size, they got speed, they got some power. They just got a lot of great weapons, and I'm just not seeing the creativity to get those guys their opportunities. But we'll see. Maybe this is the week that Bill Musgrave's been called out, and let's see what he can do with it. All right, guys. Well, let's get to our prediction time. What score would you guys give this game?
I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be a really good game, but that's not your average, I guess, Thursday game, because it's been kind of a lull, kind of a boring game. But I think it's going to be it's going to be a good one. Maybe not the best teams in the National Football League, but I think as far as national spotlight and everything, and with everything that's unfolding, behind the scenes and potentially with the coaching staff, I think that the Broncos will ultimately back it up with their words and play a pretty good ball game. But I think that the Arizona Cardinals come out on top. I think that they win 23-20.
Okay. What about you, Sayre?
What did Von Miller say that they were going to kick on Thursday night? I was just
some booty.
Some booty.
Yeah. I really don't think that he's going to let. For me, I don't ever pick I don't predict the Broncos to lose. I just don't like that karma. I'd rather be wrong about saying that they were going to win than be wrong about them saying they were going to lose. It's just always been my philosophy. And so I always find ways that I think they're going to win, even if I don't think that they're going to win. I do actually think that they're going to win this game. I do think that Von Miller's word is going to prove true. Josh Rosen has he's got a long day ahead of him. I don't know if the Cardinals turf is real grass or not, but his jersey's going to have a lot of green on it, and they're wearing black jerseys, I'm pretty sure. So it's going to get green, and he's going to be seeing the lights on the ceiling of that stadium quite often. I'm going to say the Broncos 27, Cardinals 13, and maybe even a defensive score to bump that up to a 34. I'm going with Von Miller on this one. I'm saying they're going to kick. They're going to open up a can.
I was the same way. I honestly actually had the Broncos losing this game until I heard Von Miller's talk today.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard that, because Von Miller doesn't usually talk that way.
No,
he does. He's usually a pretty even-keeled guy, kind of joking around, all those kind of things. But he was pretty dead serious. This is what's going to happen. And so just hearing your best player on your team begin to speak that way, I think it just sends ripple effects through the rest of the organization. And I'm with you. I think the Broncos actually come out on top. I had them losing before today, but I'm gonna change this up, and I'll go Broncos 30. Cardinals 20.
I like that 30. I like to hear it.
I know. I love when your team can score 30 points. I just feel so good about that. Just sounds right.
Yep.
So I think they get some things right. Get 10 days to prepare for the Chiefs, and maybe we see some magic, some mile high magic moving forward. But,
12-4 till we ain't, Carl.
That's right. That is right. Well, that will wrap up another episode of Building the Broncos. You can find myself on Twitter at Carl Dumler, MHH. And, of course, you can find – I'll let you guys give your Twitter handles again.
You can follow me at Cameron Parker PO, as well as the Locked On Broncos Twitter handle of the podcast that Cody and I do at Locked On Broncos, and obviously what Sayre and I do on Twitter at Predom Orange. So you guys can check us out there at Predominantly Orange. Thank you guys. Thank you, Carl, for having me on, man.
What
Yeah,
about
I really
you, Sayre?
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, you can always find me at Sayre Bedinger, at Knights of Den for the podcast, and just all the great crew between you guys at Mile High Huddle and Predominantly Orange. There's a lot of great people to follow, and we're always interacting. So just jump in and become part of the family. Definitely.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend following these guys, listening to their podcasts. I listen to them on a regular basis, and makes my week definitely a much better listening to them. I enjoy you guys so much more than the local media. Some of them that get going,
Thank you.
They just get a little crazy. You guys stay a lot more even keeled, so I really appreciate that. And just like to look at the team, and you're kind of like us, like to look at the team and say, hey, how can we get better? Let's not just sit here and say, oh, no, the sky is falling. The end of the world is here. But it's actually, hey, things are not as bad as they seem. They're maybe not as good as they seem. Whatever way, things can always be better. Things can always be worse. So I always appreciate listening to you guys, and I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, we like to keep it locked on and keep it real.
There you go. All right. Well, make sure you also head over to Mile High Huddle, a new affiliate of the 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. You can head over to iTunes and leave us that 5-star rating and comment. Your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Broncos deep dives. We aren't just here to bring you the news, but an in-depth analysis each week, from team building, game planning, and 365 days of covering the Denver Broncos. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast on iTunes and for Android users, Stitcher, as well as check us out on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and, of course, at Huddle Up Pod. Again, please be sure to subscribe and rate and reach out to us, as we really do love and interacting with all you Bronco fans. For Carl Dumler, I know Nick's not here. We'll wish him well, and he's in God's country there in Colorado right now. But this will be us wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week. And as Nick always loves to close out the show, go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.